Oh look, how to conquer atheism in 8 minutes. Well, let's dive in and see if I come out as an atheist still.
Now the Quran asks a very simple question. In chapter number 52, verse number 35 of the Quran, it says, "Were they created from nothing, or were they themselves the creators of themselves?"
Which is, of course, a false dichotomy. Humans came from Darwinian evolution, which started with chemical abiogenesis, which was a spontaneous process.
Now if you speak to an educated atheist, they will not deny the fact that the universe had a beginning, because this is pretty much scientifically proven. However, when you start speaking to them about what happened before the universe,
well, nobody really knows. The beginning of the universe is highly speculative in nature and probably won't be anything else.
this is when you'll get an unsure answer. They'll say, "We don't know."
And that's bad. Why? Again, the beginning of the universe is highly speculative in nature, and we may not even be able to know exactly how or why the universe began. But there was no such thing as before the universe, because the universe holds space and time, and there's no such thing as before time existed. But just because we don't know this one thing about the world around us does not mean that there is a God.
And this is the first point of contention. If they don't know, then why do they call themselves atheists?
Because we don't believe in a God.
Since that word means without God. And agnostic, which is a better word, means without knowledge, because it comes from the two Greek words, without meaning without, and gnostos, meaning knowledge, meaning without knowledge.
Look, etymology does not determine the definition of a word. Language does not follow a strict set of logical rules, but instead is governed by popular usage. And just because we don't know this one thing about the universe does not mean that we don't know whether or not there is a God. But most importantly, you don't understand the real definition of the term atheist. Atheists aren't people who say there absolutely is no God, but instead atheists are people who don't say that there is a God. So in that sense, you can have a Gnostic atheist as well as an agnostic atheist. For example, I accept the possibility of there being a deistic God, but I am not convinced that there is one, nor that there is any other God, so I am an agnostic atheist.
Moving on now. If you really want to stop an atheist in his tracks, all you really require is one deductive argument. Now, the argument goes like this. That everything, number one, everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Well, how do we know that? Seriously, it may seem obvious because that's how we experience things as we know it, but what actual proof do we have that that is the case?
Let me say that one more time. Everything that begins to exist has a cause.
Oh, I get it now. He said it twice. Now I believe it. Okay.
And number two, that the universe began to exist, as we've just mentioned.
Again, how do we know that? The early stages of the universe is only speculation, and there are many different ideas as to how or whether or not the universe actually began.
3 logically follows, which is the universe therefore has a cause.
Okay, sure, you've proven the existence of quantum fluctuations, but what does this have to do with God?
Now, the question is, what kind of cause is this? Because if we say that that cause had a cause, and that cause had a cause, and that cause had a cause, and we go regressively infinitely backward, then we would have an infinitely regressive line.
And why is that impossible? Because, again, it may seem obvious, but how do we really know? Especially in regards to something as speculative as the origin of the universe.
Thus, it's completely appropriate and completely necessary for that cause to be uncaused.
Well, what makes you think that? Even if an infinite regression is impossible, why can't we have a finite regression? Why can't the cause of the universe have a cause that has a cause that has a cause that has a cause that is itself uncaused? Just because an infinite regression is impossible doesn't mean that all regressions are impossible.
To have no beginning and to have the knowledge and creative capacity to change the situation?
No, not really, actually. Because from the beginning of the universe, everything from there seems to be a spontaneous process. All that was needed to form the universe as we know it today was for the initial singularity to expand, which was probably caused by quantum fluctuations.
So, the only way an atheist can really destroy this argument is by destroying one of the two premises.
But we really don't have to if your premises aren't actually proven in the first place. This all just seems like philosophical speculation.
One, which is that that everything that begins to exist has a cause. They can try and prove that, but then have to show why and how things don't come into existence, popping into existence on a day-to-day basis. They won't be able to show you this scientifically or empirically.
What makes you think that? What makes you think that this doesn't happen at, say, the quantum level, which the beginning of the universe would have been at a quantum level?
Another argument that you can bring forward to the atheist is what's referred to commonly as the fine-tuning argument. That the universe is so fine-tuned that it would allow life to exist.
Well, what makes you think that the universe is fine-tuned? What makes you think that if the universe was different in some way, that it would then be impossible for different forms of life to form?
So you don't have to believe in God to recognize this reality. Now there are three actual options, as you can choose one of them, to how this universe became so finely tuned.
Why are there only three? How do we know for sure that there isn't any other options?
Option number one is that it evolved somehow.
Well, yeah, it did evolve. Once the universe started expanding, particles grouped together to form atoms. Atoms grouped together in large amounts to form stars, which then started stellar nucleosynthesis to form all of the heavier elements that we see. So once the singularity started to expand, the formation of the universe was a spontaneous process governed by the fundamental laws of the universe.
Well, this option is not available in physics, and there's no actual evidence of that at all. And no serious physicist has ever made such a proposition. Thus, it's unscientific. Thus, you cannot say that.
Wow. Everything that you just said was entirely wrong. You do know that physical cosmology is a branch of science, don't you?
Option number two is that the universe is like this because it's a random generation, it's a chance factor. And this is what lots of atheists actually do say.
Well, no, not really. It's what a lot of creationists say that atheists say. Now, this really depends on what perspective you're looking at, but if you're thinking of the probability of life forming on any particular planet, sure, it's extremely low. But there are billions of planets within each galaxy, and there are billions of galaxies within the universe. So just because of the sheer amount of planets, it's extremely likely that there are a few planets that did form life.
Now, having said that, if you look at Roger Penrose, he's a physicist in Oxford University, he was talking about the entropy levels in the beginning of the universe. And he says that the possibility of the entropy level being the way it is in the beginning of the universe is, and he says, 10 to the power of 10 times 123. And that's a big number.
Okay, sure, big number. But how does this even make sense? How was it even possible for there to be a different amount of entropy in the beginning of the universe? But even if everything that you're saying is true, that doesn't make it impossible. You're saying that it's extremely unlikely, therefore it didn't happen.
That's just one calculation for one of the components of the universe in the beginning, of the early stages of the universe. Now, having said that, you should know through just this evidence that saying it's a chance factor that the universe came into being is a ridiculous option that shouldn't even be uttered.
There's a very small chance, therefore it's absolutely impossible. Now, I don't really like using this argument, but what makes you think that we are the only universe in existence? What makes you think that there aren't other universes that have different physics? Because if there are other universes, especially if there's infinite universes, then it's extremely possible that something improbable could happen in one of them.
The third option is that there was a designer, there was a creator, there was an inventor. This makes more sense, doesn't it?
Well, to some, but the thing is, we don't have any indication that there is such a being. In fact, we have just the opposite. We have every indication that the universe and everything in it was formed in a spontaneous process.
Okay, if you don't want to admit it now, it doesn't matter. If you don't want to admit it, it doesn't matter.
It's okay if you don't admit it. I mean, you know that what I'm saying is true, because of course it is, but you don't have to admit it.
I just want to say something to you guys. To the atheists. Seriously. This is what I want to say. That you don't even need to logically follow these arguments that I'm putting forward to you. These arguments make sense, they're logically grounded, but you don't need to follow them. Because it's actually a natural predisposition to believe in God.
No, not really. People aren't born believing in God, but people are susceptible to accepting such ideas. That doesn't mean that God actually does exist. That says more about us and our psychology than it does about the world around us. Because, I mean, we have a predisposition to think that there are monsters in the darkness, even when we absolutely know that there is none. People aren't born believing in the supernatural. That is something that you have to be taught. And children who are not taught that from a young age don't grow up to believe in it.
So to believe in God, you don't have to actually follow any logic whatsoever. You don't have to be a smart person.
Isn't that the truth?
It should be a natural thing.
Even if it is natural, that doesn't make it true.
So I say this. I say it's time now. It's time to stop fooling ourselves.
Silly atheists, stop fooling yourselves. You know you believe what I believe. Do you not see how patronizing you are?
It's time. What did you say? No, I'll say it one more time. I said it's time. It's time to release yourself from the suppressive shackles of atheism that are stopping you from realizing your true potential.
What does that even mean? What potential do I have that I can't do if I lack a belief in a God? Because as far as I'm concerned, and as far as I can see, the only potential that anybody has is what's possible in the physical world.
Once you've completely taken those shackles away from yourself and liberated yourself from atheism and released your predisposed self, that's the true self, your true self. Once you've done that, then and only then will you realize both peace and purpose in life.
What makes you think that I can't have peace or have any sort of purpose without believing in a God?
Then and only then will you reach the basic human function.
What?
Now, this really, I'll leave it open for the atheist. Try and break down this logical argument. Try and break it down.